If USC rushes for 2,000 yards, they're going to...
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Holkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC part of the Locked On Network. Your first listen every day, whether you're watching the show on YouTube, wherever you are downloading your podcast, the show is always free, and you know the show always appreciates your support. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I'm not going to say USC is going 12-0 if they rush for 2,000 yards as a team. I don't need to say that. The matrix analytics from the college football professor's data points, it made the case for it. They used these 5 data points. In case you missed yesterday's episode of Locked on USC, shame on you, but here's what I talked about. 5 data points. USC has, based on their returning production, their roster talent, their coaching staff efficiency, their home field advantage, and the program's trajectory based on the last 3 to 5 years, and not knowing how each of those categories are weighted, it was coming out that based on USC's returning production, being at least that part of it up front, USC is going to finish the season 12-0, the regular season. Again, I didn't make that claim. That's the nutshell of the whole thing. Now, on the recruiting part of it, on the returning production part of this, considering that the Trojans were on, well, the most of their projection comes from the outside, on the their wide receivers. So you'd think that Miller Moss and the wide receivers, that's probably the way to go when we're talking about returning production, right? Right. I mean, we should be. Lincoln isn't going to ignore what he does best, and that's scheming to get guys open, throwing the ball. He shouldn't. I mean, it would be stupid to kind of ignore what your strength is. However, at the same time, look, the Trojans need to use their changeup more often. Okay, use that off-speed pitch. Keep the defense off balance. Last year, 2023, despite Coach Riley's aversion to running the ball, at least it felt that way, USC still scored 33 times running the ball. I know, crazy. Didn't feel like it, but they did. Caleb led the team with 11 rushing touchdowns. Marshawn Lloyd, 9. Austin Jones, 7. USC scored 37 times passing the ball. So it was balanced. But it's not about the touchdowns. That's not what I'm trying to point out here. It's about the yards per carry. This is where USC lost their way with the running game. USC ranked 92nd nationally with their rushing offense. Only 134 yards per game. That's terrible. But when USC actually attempted to run the ball, they picked up almost 5 yards per carry. So if we're looking at the statistics, that puts them in the top 30 territory statistically in the country. Now, I want to draw a comparison. I've told you before, when I see Miller Moss play quarterback, it reminds me of watching Mark Sanchez. So I looked up the numbers. And the reason being is the last time USC, as a team, they competed for a national championship, even though they didn't get to play in the national championship game. It was back in 2008 when Sanchez was quarterbacking USC's offense. That year, USC finished their 2008 season. Mark had 34 of the team's 36 passing touchdowns. I think Mitch Mustain had the other 2. The only so even though they threw for 36 scores, they were only averaging 260 yards per game through the air. Mark also rushed for 3 touchdowns on the ground. USC as a team, they only rushed for 27 touchdowns. So in 2024, USC was scoring more points. Now, going back to that 2008 squad, even though they only scored 27 rushing touchdowns, what they did do, they averaged 195 yards per game on the ground. I mean, it's a big difference. I'm looking for Coach Riley to be more disciplined this year. Last year, USC amassed literally over 4,300 yards through the air and only 1,700 yards on the ground. You say, well, why would 300 more yards on the ground make a difference? It's not that. However, if you get to 2,000 yards rushing as a team, you're probably using more time off the clock. So not only is it a 200-yard difference per game, and I'm talking about when you take off those, extra yards, 100 yards from the passing game, which I think USC last year was like 330 yards per game. Add that to your rushing total. You're still getting the same net yards. So Coach Riley needs to be disciplined. He needs to resist that temptation to throw the ball as frequently and as much as he does. Again, I know I'm kind of being hypocritical here because of their returning production is at the wide receiver position. But if he uses some discipline, you can have a really good balanced offense. And you can, especially if you have the support of a solid defense. And that's all we're looking for right now. If their new defensive staff can have just a marginal effect, then USC is they're going to be better on defense. There shouldn't be any question about that, right? If the new defensive staff can have a significant effect, put together a solid defense, kind of like what they did at UCLA, what Antonlynn's scheme did at UCLA, that's going to be good enough to compete. And I'm not talking about competing on the field only and maybe getting to 8 or 9 wins. I'm talking about competing for a national championship, getting to the playoffs. Everyone points to USC's weakness on defense. Fair call. Totally get it. But let's not forget, USC is still going to be very lethal on offense, right? Lincoln Riley's still the play caller. USC can still be lethal on offense. However, at the same time, it doesn't have to happen in 3 minutes or less. A little bit of hyperbole there, but you understand where I'm going with this. USC was a quick score team. The Trojans were the 119th ranked team in the country in time of possession last year. Less than 28 minutes per game. Let me repeat that. USC on offense only had the ball less than 28 minutes per game. So the flip side, that meant their defense was on the field too long, right? Absolutely. Look, I cannot wait. Honestly, I cannot wait to see how Coach Riley has evolved since all these offseason moves. As long as Coach Riley follows through on what he told his new defensive coordinator, Antonlynn, when he was hired, I think all will be okay. Let me remind everybody. What I told Coach Lynn is my mentality going into it is we're going to do everything that we can in this program to accelerate the process of us playing great defense. And whatever it takes to get that done from a developmental standpoint, from a staffing standpoint, from the way we practice, everything here is going to be done with a defensive mind first. Again, the edge here is always going to go to what's best for our defense. Okay, that last sentence. Always going to go to what's best for our defense. You know what's best? An offense that stays on the field more than your defense. You know how you do that? You know how you get the time of possession? How you gain that advantage? Run the ball. The more you run the ball, all of a sudden those 1,700 yards that you had last year, they'll be 2,000 yards. Yep, it's baseball season. Like you, like me, we probably spent a lot of time growing up going to our favorite Major League Baseball park. I was always at Dodger Stadium, and I was doing that before it got really expensive. before all that corporate advertising out there on the walls. But Game Time has these killer last-minute deals. They have all-in prices, and they even have views from your seat, and they have the best price guarantee. So Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. See the view from your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total up front. That way you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. Buy your tickets in seconds. 2 taps, and you are done. Trojan fans, we are like 44 days away from USC versus LSU. Do you have your tickets for that game yet? Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always find the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKED like David, ON like Nancy for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Right now, I've got Fox Sports on. It's muted. I'm doing the show. If it wasn't muted, you'd probably hear somebody yelling in the background. Do me a favor, make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel, and it's programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, and it's streaming for you 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Question for you. What's scarier? Zachariah Branch playing wide receiver, lining Zachariah up in the backfield as a running back. Or what about when he's returning punch or kickoffs? Which is scarier? A, B, or C? It was a trick question. Zachariah is equally scary in any environment. Doesn't matter. What matters is getting him the ball in his hands in open space. That should be the focus this year. He earned freshman All-American status last year. And everyone, I think, is anticipating that Branch is going to make that jump from freshman phenom to sophomore stud. And with that sophomore stud label, also a potential Heisman candidate. This is what makes him even scarier. I heard him say this on the Up Next podcast with Adam Brenneman. Zachariah loves it when there are a lot of people watching him. Okay? He likes when people are watching him. So when USC's traveling, playing in those sold-out stadiums, I have a feeling the opponent's going to be scared. He said, I feed off the crowd, so the more people there, I'm just going to roll with it. Okay. That's confidence. I like it. And again, what I like is it's bad news for all those sold-out stadiums. Again, they're all coming to see USC. All this is new. So imagine 100,000 Wolverine fans watching Zachariah return the opening kickoff for a touchdown. That's how you silence a stadium. That's how you scare the opponent. On that podcast, he talked about how he grew up a Trojan fan, and that's why he picked USC over everyone else. By the way, he almost became an Ohio State Buckeye. Yeah. So when USC hired Coach Riley, it obviously helped. In fact, Zachariah talked about how he and Coach Riley have known each other since he was in the 8th grade. But Zachariah wants to see he wants to see his team win first. However, he does have some personal goals, and one of them is to win the Heisman at USC. So to those of you who think it's going to take time for Branch, maybe and the rest of the wide receivers to, for that chemistry to be developed, it ain't. and I've talked about this. Zachariah kind of supported me. Remember, these guys, all the four freshmen, Zachariah and Jacoby and Deuce and Mackay, these guys were getting most of their practice reps with the second team, with Miller Moss. Remember Caleb Williams, you had Taj Washington, Brendan Rice. Those were the go-to guys last year. And they worked the freshmen in, but Marshawn Lloyd, again, Brendan, Taj Washington, those are really your go-to guys when they're on the receiving end. So I think that chemistry is going to surprise people, that how well Miller Moss and the wide receivers get along with each other already. And you saw it in the Holiday Bowl. I'm not telling you anything you haven't seen already. So I mentioned how Zachariah almost became a Buckeye coming out of high school. And that's how bad things were for USC. He grew up being a Trojan fan, walking around, the campus, going to tailgates when he was a little kid. So, even trying to sell a vision to a diehard who grew up, wanting to play for USC, it was hard. Fortunately, USC did what was necessary. Lincoln Riley didn't hurt. Remember, Zachariah was not the first Branch to become a Trojan. His older brother, Zion. So during that, he wasn't overwhelmed with the recruiting process. He used to follow Zion around to his official visits. One of the things I noticed when Zachariah was talking, when he speaks, is how introspective he is. Very well thought. He was talking about with the recruiting process. I just brought out how he was tagging along with Zion, and that way he wasn't overwhelmed when it was his turn. But he also talked about observing and following around Caleb Williams last year, and kind of just watching how he handled all of being the team leader and all the distractions that come with being a Heisman winner. Everything that kind of comes with it, especially living in LA. And then he also talked about Miller Moss's leadership style and how it's probably perfect for this year's squad. Zachariah is, as well as his older brother, much more mature than guys for their age. Both of them have already started a foundation. I know I'm getting sidetracked here a little bit. I'll bring it back to Zachariah, I promise. But he and his brother Zion, they've already started a foundation. It's called the Branch Out Foundation, and it's all about giving back to the community. Their mission statement: the foundation is dedicated to the support of youth initiatives, including homelessness, after-school programs, health and wellness, as well as other charitable causes. The foundation focuses on assisting the communities of Los Angeles and Las Vegas, where the Branch family came from. So, Zachariah Branch is literally one of the scariest players in the country. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but he's yoked. I mean, he's 5'11", 6 foot, about 180, 185 pounds. When you see him, you're like, yeah. If you see him on the field, you know what he's capable of. He's that Xbox button on your joystick. Here's my bold prediction. In 2024, Zachariah Branch will have 2 special team touchdowns. He'll match what he did last year. He's going to have 5 rushing touchdowns. He's also going to have 12 receiving touchdowns. Do the math. That's 19. In 1991, when Desmond Howard won his Heisman Trophy, he also scored 19 touchdowns. That year, he caught 61 passes for 960 yards. He had 19 total scores. He rushed 12 times for 165 yards, 2 touchdowns. He averaged 15.3 yards with a touchdown on his punt returns and 31 yards on kick returns with a touchdown. The All-American won the Heisman Trophy by the second largest margin of victory in the trophy's history at the time. Last year, Zachariah led the country in punt returns with over 22 yards per attempt. And that was 3 more yards than the next guy on the list. I don't even know who it was. I think he went to Florida Atlantic University. I'm not going to say, oh, by the way, he also had 18 yards per game returning kicks. A lot of times he didn't have an opportunity to return kicks. So I'm not going to say that Zachariah is going to approach 1,000 yards receiving like Desmond had 960. He's got a lot of good company to share the ball with on the outside. But I think 700, 750 is more than doable. I'm looking for Zachariah to scare everyone, right? I gave you what he can possibly do in Michigan. USC and Halloween that weekend. It's always scary. USC, for whatever reason, it's always going to be a nail biter. Last year in Berkeley, USC barely escaped, right? 50-49. The year before that, in Tucson, I mean, Arizona was in that game way too long. And the year before that, in 2021, at home against Arizona, USC barely hung on. In 2020, there wasn't Halloween. COVID scared everyone away. This year, Halloween falls on Thursday. USC plays at Washington that Saturday. I need Zachariah to scare the Huskies. That will be one of his Heisman moments. I don't know. I think he will score a touchdown 2 different ways in that game. One on the ground, one passing. Zachariah Branch is a scary player. He might not look at it when you stand there and you look at it and you're saying, it's not a scary looking player. Once those pads come on and the lights come on, very scary. And I'm glad he's wearing Cardinal and gold. Imagine if he had gone to Ohio State. So glad he didn't. All right. It's time for my Friday rant. What's happened to discipline? To me, I mean, I consider discipline a lost art. Not enough people know how to do it. Not enough people are willing to do it. You know, talk about players transferring schools all the time. I kind of touched on it a little bit yesterday on yesterday's episode of Locked on USC. Whatever happened to playing for the school you grew up down the street from? Being loyal. We've already lost that. You know, coaches not being able to maintain discipline. And that's a really hard thing to do. I mean, you look at Georgia's program. They are considered one of the best programs in the country right now. But from the outside looking in, you're thinking, well, how disciplined are they? I mean, does their coach have to take away their player car keys? I know they're motivated, but being motivated and disciplined both complement each other, and both are really important, really integral to, you know, if you want to be successful, you need to be both. You need to be motivated as well as disciplined. Let me see if I can explain the difference. A motivated person is inspired. Okay, they have their internal reasoning to be inspired. It's their why, their North Star, so to speak. A disciplined person is going to get the job done regardless of their why. Doesn't matter what the emotion is. It doesn't matter why they're motivated. They're going to make sure discipline is the primary motivating factor. Again, both goals focus on success. You need them both. However, motivation without discipline, it's kind of like wishful thinking when you think about it. For me, it's like the whole path of least resistance. Talk about it all the time. I hate it. Motivation only takes you so far. Some people respond positively to bad things because they remained disciplined. They didn't let, falling off the horse keep them down. You get shot in the ear, you get back up, that type of thing. Sorry, shouldn't inject that here. What I will say is this. Discipline, it's a learned method. It's how you sustain that level of productivity. And that's going to help you achieve your goals. Motivated football players, they're excited to play every week. They're looking forward to putting on the helmet, getting in uniform, seeing what's out there. But here's the thing. What happens to that football player when adversity strikes? And it's going to happen. It always does. So who do you want on your sideline? Do you want the motivated towel waver? You need those guys. You need the positive, motivated guys. Or do you want the confident player who believes that he believes in his preparation and his ability? For me, the answer is simple. It's clear, right? Sometimes, again, I've said it, sometimes players are both. Oftentimes, it kind of depends on the situation. Everything's unique. Don't want to look at this in a vacuum. But what I see a whole lot of, I see a whole lot of motivation to get that NIL back, that name, image, likeness back. A whole lot of motivation to get that Oregon signing bonus. And I'm just seeing less and less discipline. Guys staying committed. That's a form of discipline. If you don't know by now, you'll know it by the time you're done listening to this show and any other show that I talk about. Kobe Bryant, one of my favorite athletes, one of the most motivated athletes I've ever watched. But it was his discipline to work harder than anyone else. That was his North Star journey. That was his motivation. He wanted to be better than everybody else. And in order to do that, you had to be disciplined. You had to put in the work. When nobody's looking, be there first, the last to lead, that type of stuff. Trust me, I know this USC team is motivated. They want to prove that last year was a team that played without discipline. You need a small example of that? I brought it up before. The defense leaving their defensive coordinator hanging to end a defensive huddle with a high five. That was a lack of discipline from the team. As much as they needed to make the change at defensive coordinator, I never want to see that look again. Terrible look. I want to watch this team have fun while they play the games. Honestly, I really do. You've got to have fun. Otherwise, don't play the game. But I would actually prefer to watch a well-disciplined, a team that plays fundamentally sound football. You can do both. A focused and disciplined teams, they do the right thing despite the situation, whatever it is. Doesn't matter. So this USC team, I'm talking about guys. These are the guys who are going to lead the team. Players who are focused but also disciplined. For discipline in different ways. So you got players like Miller Moss, who stayed the course. You had players in the past like Caleb Williams. You've got Zachariah Branch. You got Jonah Monheim. They understand what it takes. And they're some of the most disciplined players on the team. They work the hardest. That's my rant. Not really a rant, kind of a little bit of a motivational speech to be disciplined. I'm going to be back next week with another 5 episodes. Don't forget next week, USC Media Day. I'll be there. I'll have it all for you. So Until the next episode of Locked On USC, everyone, you know what to do.